Beautiful. So welcome you guys to the interview workshop part one. And this is how to sell yourself. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put in the chat. My co-director Allison will be able to take care of the questions. So this is brought to you by SWE's Evening with Industry Committee. We run Evening with Industry, which is a huge networking event that will be hosted in January. So be on the lookout for the RSVP for that. So the reason why I personally really wanted to do an interview workshop is because I just really wanted to help you guys with this whole interview process, especially being virtual. And if you're in the application process right now, I just wanted to start off with a statistic that I've been thinking about a lot, which is that men will tend to apply for positions which they feel like they are 20% qualified for, whereas women will only apply for positions where they feel like they're 80% qualified for. So it's like, I feel like women tend to, like, on average, not saying it's everyone, be a little more cautious about, am I good enough for this? Like, am I qualified enough for this? And I'm challenging you guys to just put yourself out there, because applying for an internship or a full-time position, you know, it's better than not applying at all. The worst you can get is rejection. So if you got an interview from your application, first off, congratulations, that is amazing. And this is your opportunity to showcase yourself beyond just your resume and really bring it to life. So just a disclaimer, we're going to be going through a bunch of things about interviews today. These are just suggestions for you to be like extremely prepared, but you don't need to do all of these to be a good interviewee. So just keep that in mind. Alrighty, so next slide. So this is the first part of a two-part series. So today we're going to be talking about how to sell yourself and how to put yourself forward with the best foot. And part two will be held on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday in 2 days, which are alumni mock interviews. We have amazing alumni that are volunteering their time to do mock interviews. And if you've signed up for that, amazing. You'll be getting an email with confirmation coming up tomorrow about your interviewer and your time slot. Cool. Okay, so once you've gotten your interview, how do you prepare? So before you go in, do your research. You hear this a lot. You want to do your research about the company, about the position, about the industry. You want to prepare questions for your interviewer and also prepare stories about yourself. And I'll be going through each one of these parts. So researching your company. So this can include what the company does, what products they make, what projects they're doing, and you can find these just from their website. And I think if you do research on this, you know, you can bring this up during your interview and it makes it seem like you really know what the company works on, and it makes you stand out as someone who is actually interested in their company. So definitely would recommend doing that. Also for position, if you are interviewing for a specific position, make sure you know exactly what they're doing, their keywords, their job description, and being able to angle your stories to better match that position. You know, your experiences don't have to be exactly what the position entails, but if you're able to, like, you know, bend your story a little bit to match what they're looking for, I think it's very easy to do that if you think about it a little bit beforehand. And lastly, industry, know basic industry language. I know this is very obvious, and like a lot of you guys might be like, yeah, obviously, but my freshman year, I remember I interviewed for an oil and gas company for a midstream position, and I had no idea what a midstream or upstream or downstream was, and the interviewer like took the time to explain it to me during the interview, and I just felt so stupid. I was like, wow, like I didn't even know what midstream was when I was applying for midstream. So if you're entering in an industry that you might not be as comfortable in, just do your research, you know, look into basics of what that industry is, and if they mention any keywords, you'll be prepared for it. Okay, second part, questions. So most likely at the end of the interview, your interviewer will give you some time to ask you questions, and always be prepared to ask questions. I think this really shows that you're interested in the position and interested in the company and just curious in general. So here are some questions that you can ask, and we'll be sending these slides out after the workshop in case you want to refer back to these before you do have an interview. So questions like, what have you enjoyed most about working here? They can talk about company culture, what their day-to-day looks like, especially if they're in a position, they're doing like a role that you might not be as familiar with. What are some biggest challenges at your company? And at the bottom are some questions about the internship program. I did not realize how important some of these questions were until, after my first internship, but I really always when I talk about internship programs with companies, I always ask about the projects, because I've realized that if you have a good project, it makes such a big difference. If you feel like that you're actually doing something and you're using your technical skills and learning something from it. So I always like to ask about their projects. And then how much independence do you get? Do you work with a mentor? These are kind of more personal. I like to have a lot of independence with my projects, so I like to ask my interviewers about kind of what the balance is like there, but obviously ask what you're curious about. And the more curiosity you show, I think, the more interested they think you will be in their company. Okay, and this last part, which we'll spend the bulk of our time talking about, is preparing stories. So obviously they're going to ask you questions, and it's great to have some stories ready. And of course, this is kind of just like preparing to the extreme of just making sure that you are ready. And it's great now, especially that we're virtual. So if you are doing virtual interviews, you can just have like split screen and have like their video interview on one side and like a list of some stories on the other side, so you can kind of just like go and like talk about the stories that you prepared. So the way I kind of start brainstorming about these is looking at my list of activities or projects that I have been involved with. So these could be technical projects from clubs that I were a part of. These can be labs like Chem 20L or just like any of your major specific labs. These can be research on campus. These can be any of your other extracurricular activities, or even your high school projects if you are early on in your college career. And I would write down notable situations of what has happened in here. Were there any big challenges you faced? Were there any team members that were hard to work with? And then just have those prepared. So then when an interviewer asks you a question, you can kind of adjust it for the question they're asking and take it from a different angle if you're doing a specific position or industry. Okay, so of course, we can't go through an interview workshop without talking about the STAR method. And in case you haven't heard of it yet, it's this method that is very commonly used in interviews. Some interviewers will actually ask you to answer in a STAR method. And it's a great way to make sure you're mentioning every part of the story. So what STAR stands for is situation, task, action, and result. So for situation, we're setting the scene. So what is happening? Tell us if it's about a technical project, give us some background about the technical project. What were you making? What were you doing? Or that applies for any other experience that you're talking about. So provide context of the who, what, where, and when of what you're doing. So next is task. And this is what problem are you solving? Most cases, your interviewer will ask you about some challenge or some problem that you're solving. So what was the objective? What was the obstacle? So you can talk about constraints, whether that be deadline constraints or other issues or technical difficulties that come up, what is going on? A is action. So what did you do to solve the situation? How did you meet the deadlines? How did you go about, debugging? What challenge? How did you figure out the challenges? So how did you do it, and why did you choose to do that? I think that can be an important scenario, important part to add to is the why, and that really shows that you thought through the process of how to do what you did and why you did that. So in here you can also incorporate aspects of teamwork and leadership if you were working on a team, if you were doing leadership roles, and how you took initiative to solve that problem. And lastly is results. I kind of forget this part a lot. There have been times in interviews where I'm like doing the interview or I'm answering the question, I do the S, T, and A part, and I'll forget result, and I'll just sit there, and then I'll be like, oh my God, and the result of my scenario with your story of adding the results. So this can be a direct result of the challenges you were facing. Maybe you were asking a question on like how did you work with someone who was a little bit harder to work with, and you can talk about the result of directly trying to work with that person who was hard to work with. Or this can be like, you know, overall on your project, after I completed and really like achieve this part of this challenge, I was able to finish out my final project, and here was the result of my final project, or whatever experience you were working on. So these can be improvements, it can be achievements, or legacy even. If you were in an internship previously and you're like, I did this much and I also had more ideas to keep going, but I ran out of time and I left this on for my team to do. And that also applies for, you know, club projects as well. So that is the STAR method. I'm going to pause here. Were there any questions that I can answer? I haven't been looking at the chat yet. Okay, cool, no questions. So let us move on. Oh, question. Should your resume include work experience that does not have any relevance to the job/internship you're applying for? I'm thinking this work experience might be like, it might be like, you know, maybe bagging like groceries, or like tutoring or something like that. I would say in your resume, you know, if you have other skill, like technical skills on there, I would put that on instead of work experience that isn't relevant. But if you have space and you maybe are earlier on in your college career and you haven't done other things yet, you can add them in. I think it shows that, you know, you have the responsibility that it takes to do whatever work it is because you have worked in corporate setting. But again, if you have the technical experience or just other extracurriculars at UCLA, I would put that on and make that a priority. Okay. So continuing on, before I get into example of the STAR method, I'm going to start off with some tips and advice. So firstly, we are engineers, or maybe we're in STEM, but we are problem solvers. And that's why companies love us, because when we see a problem, we're going to want to solve it. And our mind thinks very chronologically, or just like step by step, right? We see a problem. How are we going to solve this next? How are we going to solve this one problem? And then maybe another problem arises. How are we going to solve that next problem? And we just like work really orderly like that. And if you're able to show that in your interviews, it shows great communication skills of like, you not only know how to solve a problem, but you know how to communicate how you solve that problem. So just remembering when you're answering these questions in a behavioral interview, to like mention every single part that comes up. And that also just comes with the STAR method of just going chronologically like that, and just talking about everything that comes up with your experience. And the next part is like trying to answer your questions with like your previous experience in technical projects. So again, as I mentioned, this can be your extracurricular technical projects. It can be labs, it can be research, it can be side projects that you do for fun. I like always would want to talk about, you know, Society of Women Engineers, or like other things that are great, or like leadership, or, you know, just like extracurriculars, like maybe you're in a dance club and you're in leadership for that. And even though your experiences might be great for that, just also remember you're probably most likely going to be applying for a technical skill. So try to answer your questions with technical projects. Next bullet point, don't give any red flags. Might seem a little obvious, but it's a little harder than you would think, especially for questions like, tell us about a time that you're working with a team member who was hard to cooperate with. So how can you describe that it was hard to work with that teammate while still being like, you know, they're like, while still making it not seem like you think people are hard to work with and you kind of just like push away from them. So especially for those types of questions, be careful that you're not saying anything that makes it sound like, oh, like I just can't work with different types of people. Next, don't give away confidentiality. So like if you have worked in previous internships before, don't give away anything that's too confidential. It's better just to say, I can't tell you too much, like I can't go too into depth about this, but I can give you a more general idea of what I was doing. And lastly, an interview is a discussion, so be authentic. I personally love interviews because I feel like this is the only time that I get to really showcase my personality rather than just like what I am on a piece of paper. Something that I personally struggle with is like, I feel like I'm not technical enough, but I feel like with being able to talk to people, they can see like I'm a genuinely curious mind person. And that's what I can show through in my interview that I don't get to show through otherwise. And just making a discussion, if you answer a question, they like comment on your answer. If you can just start a discussion on like something that you guys want to talk about, like that makes it seem more of like just you're meeting new people rather than, oh, I am here interviewing a robot and I need to interview like all these people. So just trying to make it more personable.
Amy, before you go on, we have a few questions that maybe we could address.
Okay. Yeah, sounds great.
Can you please explain the difference between a behavioral and a technical interview?
Yes, absolutely. I should have started off with that. So a behavioral interview will ask you about how you work like in a team, or like tell me about a time when you solved a challenge, or tell me about a time when you struggle to meet deadlines or something like that, which is like basically how do you work with people and how do you work under circumstances. Versus technical interview, usually what we mean by that is testing your technical skills. So this is, I think, most common with computer science and mechanical engineering. Well, for like CS, they'll probably quiz you on like something and ask you to code something. For mechanical, they might ask you something like actually technical about like if your battery is overheating, what is going on? And it's very much like use your skills that you've learned in class to answer that question. And it's more technical related. What are some common red flags? Okay, yeah, so I mentioned like just being open-minded to working with different types of people like that. And then also just like don't be negative. Like especially like in challenges where it's like it's really hard and you're really struggling with it, like just try not to show negativity, because it might come up as a red flag of like, oh, they can't like approach a situation that's too difficult. So just be careful of those. Okay, how would you go how do you go about if you have little to no experience in can't read, little to no technical experience or projects? That is totally okay. If you got into UCLA, you have done something right, and you're a good student, and maybe in high school you've done extracurriculars. You can definitely bring up those kinds of extracurriculars. Like you can talk about, how you're doing maybe a cultural club, or you're doing some other type of things. And just your experiences in general, you can always talk about like challenges that you faced. If you don't have technical, that's okay. Like talk about a challenge that you faced in another situation, or talk about like teammates that were hard to work with, maybe in a group project. So it's totally okay if you don't have any technical experience yet. Okay, do all your technical projects have to be personal projects, or can you talk about class projects as well? You can absolutely talk about class projects. You can talk about labs. You can talk about group projects. Yeah, definitely you can talk about other projects as well. Great questions. Alrighty. So next, I will go into an example star method. So this is honestly a question that like I've answered in an interview, and this is how I would go about responding to it. And I've gotten some feedback from previous alumni mock interviews. So I think it's decently good, but also like, take it with a grain of salt. Okay, so I'll go through this first and then answer questions from the chat. So this says, tell me about a time where a project or assignment didn't go as planned. How did you go about fixing it? Also wanted to mention earlier, I said, you might have experiences that are not directly aligned with what you want to do in your role. and try to angle it from a different perspective. So this is a great example of that. I was doing more research in this experience, but I want to do things that are more industry and consumer based. So I'm trying to angle this experience in a more like industry related situation. So how I would go about answering this question would be something like this. This past summer, I was doing an internship, doing research at a company that does paint coatings for automotive and aerospace applications. So I was studying the fluid dynamic properties of the formulations. And in order to do this, I was trying to study micron-sized droplets to mimic how droplets will be spray coated on. However, the device that my mentors gave me wasn't working. And previously, before it wasn't working, I tried it on water and glycerol to be able to dispense micron-sized droplets, and it was working fine. But once I started using the formulas, the paint formulations, it didn't work. So I took a step back and I thought about why wouldn't it work? And I came to the conclusion that water and glycerol are, very small sized particles versus the paint coatings that I was using are long polymer chains, and the long polymer chains were probably getting stuck in the device. So I was trying to troubleshoot this device for, a whole day, maybe 2 days, and it just wasn't working. I was trying different size nozzles, just altering the parameters of this device, but it wasn't working. So I wanted to try alternative solutions because I didn't want to spend so much time troubleshooting a device that probably wouldn't end up working anyways. So I decided that I would want to use a syringe system and maybe use larger droplets, but it would end up working without issues. So I talked to my mentors about that, and they also agreed that it would be better to, not spend so much time on a device that wasn't working and just use bigger droplets. So with this solution, I was able to finish my project and get the conclusions that my team wanted me to. So that's kind of how I would answer it. And what feedback that I've gotten from my response is that it was great that, when I answered about the task and problem solving, I went through like, here's my task. I need to study micron-sized droplets. The device wasn't working. And how did I troubleshoot it? So I was talking about other experiences that did work and comparing it to solving aspects of that. Okay, let's answer some questions from the chat. Oh, thank you, Allison. Is there anything else that I should answer, Allison, or are we good?
I just briefly addressed them, but if there's anything that you want to add, Annie, feel free.
Yeah, this looks about good. Yeah, feel free to add more questions if you want more clarification. Okay, so as I mentioned before the interview and we want to start brainstorming these stories, how can we go about doing that? So I will show you what I have done previously. Oh, crud. How do I exit out? Okay. Hopefully you can still see my screen. So this is something that I did previously with one of my friends. His name is Juan, one of the best people I've met. And after our internships, we kind of just sat down and we were like, let's brainstorm about things that we can potentially talk about during interviews. And so this was kind of I took notes for him while he was ranting. It was an amazing session where we're just like, let's talk about our internship. Let's talk about things that happen and things that we can turn into stories. So he separated his internship into his 4 main sections that he was working on. And then we started doing this STAR method table where we talk about a topic and try to answer it with a STAR method. And now we have this beautiful table that my friend Juan can visit anytime that he is about to do an interview, and he has all these stories ready to go. If anyone asks him a question related to problem solving, he can just go oh wow, I have this amazing problem solving answer response, and that can apply for anywhere. So I wanted to give you guys the time to be able to do that. So we are going to split up into breakout rooms. So I'm hoping that Allison, oh crud, I need to make Allison host. Allison, are you host?
I didn't want to interrupt you while you're going. You were doing well.
Oh my God. Okay, let me make you host. So then she can help me make the breakout rooms. But how the breakout rooms are going to go is we're going to have 2 sessions of breakout rooms. So first we're going to be brainstorming, and I encourage you to kind of do what me and Juan have did, you know, so go through your like past experience. This can be technical. If you don't have technical, that's okay. Other things that you have done that, you know, you might want to talk about with an interviewer, and kind of think about what challenges did you face. Did you have any bugs you had to solve for CS, or devices that weren't working, or, you know, just like anything that would happen that was significant in your experience. And then part 2, so we're going to come back after that brainstorming, and then we're going to reassign breakout rooms to someone new, and we're going to do practice questions and give feedback. So, oh, this is great. Okay, here we go. So this is the doc that we will be sending the URL in a moment. So the first breakout rooms start with introductions, making sure everyone's friendly. These are going to be 2 people per breakout room. So you guys will be, oh, my screen is paused. Can you guys see things? Oh, you know what? You probably can't. But Allison just sent the link in there, so you guys can open that up and follow with me. But yeah, start off with introductions, so you guys get to know your partner, and brainstorm just experiences that you have had. And these can be answering any of these questions, and feel free to take notes, so then later on you'll be able to reference them when doing questions. And then part 2, if you scroll down to the second sheet, will be sample questions that you can ask during our second breakout room. And also, like, feel free to use this while you're prepping for behavioral interviews as well. These are just great questions. Just like pick one out and see if you're able to answer it. Okay.
Rooms are ready, Annie. Do you want me to open them?
Yes, thank you, Allison. All right, so we're gonna hop on to the breakout rooms now. And yeah, we'll see you back in around 10 minutes.
Wait, sorry. Okay, one second.
All good.
Okay, they should be open so you guys can join.
Allison, do you want to stop recording?
Yeah. Yeah, we can stop.